Welcome back to Real Hobbit Hours. It's finally time. Today, we're going to be talking about my dude, Meriadoc Brandybuck, Knight of the Rittermark, Master of Buckland, and original homie. I hope you're ready for me to attempt to do a character study because this video is going to be a deep dive on our boy, and we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff, all in the service of attempting to give him his well-deserved flowers. I feel the pathological need to make these videos because in this case, I feel like Merry takes a back seat in the fandom because of how he's portrayed in the Peter Jackson movies. And I could totally just make a video comparing Merry in the books to Merry in the movies, right? Like, here's how it goes down in the book, here's how he is in the movie. Aren't I so clever for knowing the difference? But I've got some other stuff to talk about here before we can do anything like that. I love this character too much to not give him this time. I think he deserves it. So we're just gonna dig right in. Y'all ready to eat? Alright, so in the last video I talked a lot about nobility and a nobleman as important themes for Tolkien when it comes to his Hobbit characters, particularly Frodo and Sam. I called on Dante to help define nobility, and according to Dante's definition of nobility, it can be understood as the perfection of the nature proper to each thing. So the more a thing is perfect, the more noble its nature. When someone or something perfectly embodies what it is to be that someone or something, that's nobility, right? Like a cool horse running fast, a big beautiful bird soaring through the sky. You know it when you see it and when you feel it. I also spoke a bit in the last video about how Tolkien didn't necessarily intend to write a sequel to The Hobbit. He was just asked to write more Hobbit stuff, and he had to put the Silmarillion, which is his actual life's work, his passion, like what he was obsessed with, he had to put that all on hold to work on The Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was initially meant to be very similar in tone and content to The Hobbit, which means at least one Hobbit, if not several, needed to be involved. And at least one of those several hobbits needed to be at least a little bit tookish for any of this to work. Bilbo was tookish. The Hobbit, he had that little streak of adventurousness that, stirs in the heart and pulls at the ribcage and gets one out the door. And that's what made his story good and interesting and intriguing. If he didn't have that impulse to leave the house without a handkerchief, we wouldn't have a story to tell and to listen to. And I am obsessed with how Tolkien put a name on that feeling, on that impulse, and I'm obsessed with how it relates to the larger fabric of the story and the process of how it got made. As C.S. Lewis says, hobbits are only entertaining when they're in un-hobbit-like situations, and tookishness, that impulse, that urge, tends to get hobbits into situations of all sorts, hobbit-like and otherwise. So you've got to have a took or two or several around for a good adventure story. Like, Gandalf specially selects for tookishness when he's picking hobbits for adventuring purposes. He knows that they're down to clown. So the perfection of Merry's nature is twofold. According to hobbits, Merry rocks because he's chill and clever and kind and funny and well-liked, and it doesn't hurt that his dad is the head of the Brandybuck family. And according to Tolkien, Merry rocks because he's got that tookish spark of energy, that unpredictability that Tolkien needs to write a good-ass story about hobbits. In terms of what Tolkien needs to get an interesting and entertaining Hobbit adventure story going, Merry is perfect for that job. Of our four main hobbits, Sam has 0 took blood as far as we know. Frodo has some took blood and is related to the old took, and he's a bit tookish. He is Bilbo's favorite nephew because he likes to wander about and he was curious about elves and the world outside the Shire. But when it comes down to it, Frodo is very reluctant to go out the door, and he only leaves the Shire because he has to, because he inherited the ring from Bilbo. But, like, Merry has a Took mother, and, you know, Pippin is... his name's Peregrine Took. Like, we're gonna get to him. But Merry is about as Tookish as they come. My guy has FOMO about a surprisingly perilous walk across the Shire. My dude forms a conspiracy to help his bestie leave the Shire and get on the road. Which, by the way, did you know that? Did you know that Merry, not Sam, is Frodo's best friend? If you've only seen the movies, you might not know, because the movies do not represent this well at all. Basically, the easiest way I can sum it up is that the movies handle Merry's characterization sort of the opposite of the book. In the movies, Merry just shows up in Fellowship of the Ring, and we don't really know anything about him for a while, except that he and Pippin are a package deal. Like, he's sort of also here. And then in The Two Towers and in Return of the King, the movies, we're suddenly expected to care very, very much and get very invested in this character that we barely know anything about. We don't know him. Like, beyond that, he knows about pints and he wears a yellow waistcoat and he's the Tweedledee to Pippin's Tweedledumbass. So in The Two Towers and Return of the King, again, we get this very rapid, like, breakneck character development. And it's great. Like, even in its deviations from the source text, it ends up being a decent adaptation. But in the book, it's reversed, where we get to see so much of Merry in the first book or so of Fellowship, like as Frodo's best friend and as a member of the walking party from Buckland onwards. And then again, in The Two Towers and in Return of the King, the books, there's a lot of character development. And it's better paced and it's more satisfying for us as readers because we know him really well and we've seen how he is in the Shire, and then we get to see who he becomes over the course of the quest. Peter Jackson got Merry and Pippin into the story with one crazy random happenstance in a cornfield, and while this is nice and neat and undoubtedly hilarious, the characterization of my boys suffers very much as a result. Like, in the movies, we would have absolutely no idea that Merry and Pippin are Frodo's best friends, really.
Merry, it's Frodo Baggins! Hello, Frodo!
Except in the way that they drop everything to help him get to Bree with no hesitation and no questions asked. Like, that is ride or die behavior, but they genuinely just run into this guy in a cornfield and they're like, yeah, let's go, cool. It's like the movies didn't have time for them, really, and I think that's nuts. Because if you ask me, Merry and Pippin are two of the most important characters in the story. So, to get a better idea of who Merry is and what he's really like, we're gonna look at the books and dig into our boy Meriadoc Brandybuck, ol' Callimac Brandagamba. But before we get to the final text, we're going to have a look at the origins of Merry's character. And I am extremely grateful to Christopher Tolkien for the work he did on the history of Middle-earth, so that we can do that with minimal effort. Like, truly, if you're interested in Tolkien as a writer and you haven't yet read the history of Middle-earth, I'm about to try to talk you into it. And just a note, during this part of the conversation, I'll be referring to Christopher Tolkien as Christopher, and J.R.R. Jolkien Rolkien as Tolkien. So Christopher makes clear in The History of Middle-earth that the early drafts of The Lord of the Rings were agonizing because Tolkien didn't really know yet like where he was going with all of this. He was asked to write more Hobbit stuff, and so that's what he was attempting to do. And the first drafts were closer in tone to The Hobbit, which is to say they were more childish. That's what people seem to want more of, after all. And in The Hobbit, it was easy. It's in the name. The Hobbit. Just the one Hobbit, actually.
It's just the one swan, actually.
Like, in The Lord of the Rings, it's like Tolkien went, you want hobbits, you fucking nerds? I'll give you hobbits. And he started out with several many. He added and subtracted Hobbit characters throughout the drafting process, creating new storylines for them and including even more Hobbit stuff, and then later removing all of that to eventually land on 4 main guys. But the very first Hobbit to be nailed down, the first Hobbit to have his name and personality locked in, was Meriadoc Brandybuck. Before there was the conception of the entire quest of the ring, the character that we call Meriadoc Brandybuck was on the scene. Before he was called Meriadoc, his name was Marmaduke, like the big cartoon dog. In very early drafts, in I think the 3rd version, Marmaduke appears as the beneficiary of the Baggins wine collection when Bag End is sold. In History of Middle-earth: The Return of the Shadow, Christopher notes that it is also mentioned that Bingo had very carefully disposed of his treasures, books, pictures, and a collection of toys. For his wines he found a very good, if temporary, home. Most of them went to Marmaduke Brandybuck, predecessor of Meriadoc. There he is, from the 3rd version, like, in name and in presence, and as a well-liked enough guy by the Baggins family to inherit their very nice wine collection. Like, he's being set up very early on as like a chill-ass, cool, trustworthy dude. And in subsequent drafts, indeed, Marmaduke becomes the best friend of Bingo Baggins, who later becomes Frodo Baggins. So the leaving of the Shire and like an initial journey across it were parts of the story from early on, and the need to go and pick up another Hobbit along the way appears early on as well. Christopher notes again in the History of Middle-earth, it is interesting to see the idea already present that Bingo and his companions would turn aside to collect or call up another Hobbit, at first named Frodo Brandybuck but changed to Marmaduke Brandybuck. So again, this inclusion of this Brandybuck character called Marmaduke is there from very early on. Like, Merry's whole part in this bit of the story, the leaving of the Shire part, is pretty much set from the get-go. He helps his Baggins bestie sell up and move, and he'll be joining the walking party eventually. So, in a like metatextual sense, in terms of getting the story going, like getting the walking party together, assembling the bits and pieces that create the path to the final text, Merry is there the whole time. And there's another bit from Marmaduke in the early drafts that doesn't quite make it to the final text, but it is so perfectly in character for him that I can't not talk about it. This bit is when the walking hobbits are getting close to Bingo's new home at Crick Hollow, and they're walking along the road, and they're just very tired. They're talking wistfully about having a bath. They were quite startled when suddenly a voice behind them cried, "Hi!" It then burst into a loud song. As I was sitting by the way, I saw 3 hobbits walking. One was dumb with naught to say, the others were not talking. "Good night," I said, "good night to you." They heeded not my greeting. One was deaf like the other 2. It was a merry meeting. "Marmaduke!" cried Bingo, turning round. "Where did you spring from?" "You passed me sitting at the roadside," said Marmaduke. "Perhaps I ought to have lain down in the road, but then you would have just trodden on me and passed gaily on." "We are tired," said Bingo. "So it seems. I told you you would be, but you were so proud and stiff. Ponies, puh, you said. Just a little leg stretcher before the real business begins." "As it happens, ponies would not have helped much," said Bingo. "We've been having adventures." He stopped suddenly and looked up and down the dark road. "We will tell you later." "Bless me," said Marmaduke, "but how mean of you! You shouldn't have adventures without me. And what are you peering about for? Are there some big bad rabbits loose?" "Don't be so Marmadukish all at once. I can't bear it at the end of the day," said Odo. "Let's get off our legs and have some food, and then you shall hear a tale. Can I have a bath?" "What?" said Marmaduke. "A bath? That would put you right out of training again." "A bath? I am surprised at such a question. Now lift up your chins and follow me." So as I said, this doesn't really make it into the final text, like bits and pieces of it do, but what a legendary entrance into the text for our boy. Oh my god, his little song. Like, first of all, Merry invented planking, apparently. I could have just lain down on the road and you would have just stepped on me. Just imagining him prone in the road is so funny. And then his song, I saw three hobbits walking. One was dumb with not to say, the others were not talking. That's so, like, classic Tolkien jokey joke rhyming prose. It's so good. They heeded not my greeting. One was deaf like the other two. It was a merry meeting. Like, I think the, like, one was dumb with not to say, the others were not talking. One was deaf like the other two. Like, all three of them aren't listening, but just the phrasing is very, like, silly and delightful. And then it was a merry meeting, literally, in the fact that they're meeting the character, who eventually is called Merry. I just love it. I think it's really nice, and I think it's a really good example of how Tolkien is so well acquainted with this character and so comfortable with him, and Merry gets to, like, show up and show out and be, like, this breath of fresh air of, like, new energy injected into the story. And that feeling, that kind of theme, follows Merry's character from these early drafts through to the final text. He's clever and witty and funny, and he has this kind of, like, big brother energy with everyone, even though he's younger than the main ring-bearing hobbit. It just is really good. He's everybody's best friend. I love him a lot. The hobbitry of it all. Like, he's a perfect example of the kind of silly, funny, hobbity chit-chat that Tolkien was obsessed with, that Christopher and Tolkien's other children really enjoyed, and that critics like C.S. Lewis found tiresome. Ugh, that's what I'm fucking talking about, man. Merry's characterization is so solid, and it's locked in, like, very early on. So even though this is Marmaduke here, as I said, like, Merry is the first to get his final name. Like, talk about being locked in. And the passage where this happens, again, I think is very interesting. This is when Gandalf and the ring-bearing hobbit Bingo are having a little chit-chat, talking about how Bingo has to leave the Shire. "Cheer up, Bingo, my lad," said Gandalf, throwing 2 small logs of wood on the fire and puffing it with his mouth. Immediately the wood blazed up and filled the room with dancing light. "No, I don't think you need or should go alone. Why not ask your 3 best friends to? Beg them to. Order them to if you must. I mean the only 3 who you have, perhaps indiscreetly, but perhaps with wise choice, told about your secret ring. Odo, Frodo, and Marmaduke. Written above, Meriadoc." The change from Marmaduke to Meriadoc happened early in the drafting process, and from then on we basically have our boy, like, in his final form. Merry was always a Brandybuck, and I think he always had a Took mother, and he was always a great-grandson of the old Took. He changes very little from draft to draft. Like, once he's in the story, he's in the story. Other hobbits get renamed, swapped around, they have to, like, trade dialogue, or they get cut out completely. But not Merry. Most of his dialogue doesn't change, and Merry is very much Meriadoc indeed, throughout the composition of The Lord of the Rings. So, why does it matter that Merry was an early character on the scene, the first to be locked in with his name and his characterization, and was essentially himself the whole time? Like, why is that important? I think it's important because during the early drafting process, as noted, Tolkien had a bunch of characters cooking and he didn't really know what to do with them yet. Like, he had all these hobbits on the go, but where were they going?
Oh my god.
I do think that coming up with this character and having him arrive early on in the compositional process set Tolkien up for success in terms of kind of sussing out who the other characters were or needed to be. Like, to have found an anchor character who isn't exactly the protagonist but is fully developed and ready to rumble, this may have helped give Tolkien a little nudge out of the door, as it were. Marmaduke is there in every draft, and he doesn't change very much, and he feels like the first real constant presence in the story. His name changes one time, but his dialogue and his role mostly stay the same from draft to draft. To me, it feels like Merry is the first piece of the puzzle that Tolkien was really sure about. He's a solid and sensible character putting Earth under the feet of high fantasy, and throughout the early drafts of The Lord of the Rings, Marmaduke Merry is a constant presence at Bingo Frodo's side. And because his character is so established and so familiar, and because Tolkien is so used to having him around, by the time we do get to the final text, Merry needs almost no introduction. Alright, so in the next few sections, I'm going to focus closely on some passages from The Lord of the Rings, the final text, that I think exemplify what makes Merry such a perfect hobbit and character in the story. Like, why is he the guy? He's so the guy. It's, to me, the combination of his steadfast dependability, his role as an anchor character who shows up early and hangs around the whole time, and his innate tookishness that forms his, like, kind of perfection according to hobbit nature for me. And possibly also for Tolkien. We'll see. I'm gonna read a bit from The Fellowship of the Ring, chapter 5, A Conspiracy Unmasked. This is when Frodo and Pippin and Sam, who have walked across the Shire from Bag End to Buckland, they've arrived at Crick Hollow. Merry's given them a kingly welcome, and they've finished having their dinner, and now they're gonna have a chat. It's quite a long passage, but I do think it's important for our boy Merry, and you'll understand why, so bear with me. Merry says, "Now, tell me all about it. I guess that you've been having adventures, which was not quite fair without me. I want a full account, and most of all I want to know what was the matter with old Maggot, and why he spoke to me like that. He sounded almost as if he was scared, if that is possible." "We've all been scared," said Pippin, after a pause, in which Frodo stared at the fire and did not speak. "You would have been too if you'd been chased for 2 days by black riders." "And what are they?" "Black figures riding on black horses," answered Pippin. "If Frodo won't talk, I will give you the whole tale from the beginning." He then gave a full account of their journey from the time when they left Hobbiton. Sam gave various supporting nods and exclamations. Frodo remained silent. "I should think you were making it all up," said Merry, "if I had not seen that black shape on the landing stage and heard the queer sound in Maggot's voice. What do you make of it all, Frodo?" "Cousin Frodo has been very close," said Pippin, "but the time has come for him to open out. So far we've been given nothing more to go on than Farmer Maggot's guess that it has something to do with old Bilbo's treasure." "That was only a guess," said Frodo hastily. "Maggot does not know anything." "Old Maggot is a shrewd fellow," said Merry. "A lot goes on behind his round face that does not come out in his talk. I've heard that he used to go into the old forest at one time, and he has the reputation of knowing a good many strange things. But you can at least tell us, Frodo, whether you think his guess good or bad." "I think," answered Frodo slowly, "that it was a good guess as far as it goes. There is a connection with Bilbo's old adventures, and the writers are looking, or perhaps one ought to say searching, for him, or for me. I also fear, if you want to know, that it is no joke at all, and that I am not safe here or anywhere else." He looked round at the windows and walls as if he was afraid they would suddenly give way. The others looked at him in silence and exchanged meaning glances among themselves. "It's coming out in a minute," whispered Pippin to Merry. Merry nodded. "Well," said Frodo at last, sitting up and straightening his back as if he'd made a decision, "I can't keep it dark any longer. I have got something to tell you all, but I don't know quite how to begin." "I think I could help you," said Merry quietly, "by telling you some of it myself." "What do you mean?" said Frodo, looking at him anxiously. "Just this, my dear old Frodo. You are miserable because you don't know how to say goodbye. You meant to leave the Shire, of course, but danger has come on you sooner than you expected, and now you're making up your mind to go at once, and you don't want to. We are very sorry for you." Frodo opened his mouth and shut it again. His look of surprise was so comical that they laughed. "Dear old Frodo," said Pippin, "did you really think you had thrown dust in all our eyes? You have not been nearly careful or clever enough for that. You've obviously been planning to go and saying farewell to all your haunts this year since April. We've constantly heard you muttering, 'Shall I ever look down into that valley again, I wonder?' and things like that, and pretending that you'd come to the end of your money, and actually selling your beloved Bag End to those Sackville Bagginses, and all those close talks with Gandalf." "Good heavens," said Frodo. "I thought I'd been both careful and clever. I don't know what Gandalf would say. Is all the Shire discussing my departure then? Oh no, said Mary. Don't worry about that. The secret won't keep for long, of course, but it is, at present, I think, only known to us conspirators. After all, you must remember that we know you well, and are often with you. We can usually guess what you're thinking. I knew Bilbo, too. To tell you the truth, I'd been watching you rather closely ever since he left. I thought you would go after him sooner or later. Indeed, I expected you to go sooner, and lately we have been very anxious. We've been terrified that you might give us the slip and go off suddenly, all on your own like he did. Ever since this spring we've kept our eyes open and done a good deal of planning on our own account. You are not going to escape so easily. But I must go, said Frodo. It cannot be helped, dear friends. It is wretched for us all, but it is no use your trying to keep me. Since you've guessed so much, please help me and do not hinder me. You do not understand, said Pippin. You must go, and therefore we must too. Merry and I are coming with you. Sam is an excellent fellow, and would jump down a dragon's throat to save you if he did not trip over his own feet, but you will need more than one companion in your dangerous adventure. My dear and most beloved hobbits, said Frodo, deeply moved, but I could not allow it. I decided that long ago, too. You speak of danger, but you do not understand. This is no treasure hunt, no there and back journey. I am flying from deadly peril into deadly peril. Of course we understand, said Merry firmly. That is why we've decided to come. We know that the ring is no laughing matter, but we are going to do our best to help you against the enemy. The ring, said Frodo, now completely amazed. Yes, the ring, said Merry. My dear old hobbit, you don't allow for the inquisitiveness of friends. I have known about the existence of the ring for years, before Bilbo went away, in fact, but since he obviously regarded it as secret, I kept that knowledge in my head until we formed our conspiracy. I did not know Bilbo, of course, as well as I know you. I was too young, and he was also more careful, but he was not careful enough. If you want to know how I first found out, I will tell you. Go on, said Frodo faintly. It was the Sackville Bagginses that were his downfall, as you might expect. One day, a year before the party, I happened to be walking along the road when I saw Bilbo ahead. Suddenly in the distance, the SBs appeared, coming towards us. Bilbo slowed down, and then, hey presto, he vanished. I was so startled that I hardly had the wits to hide myself in a more ordinary fashion, but I got through the hedge and walked along the field inside. I was peeping through into the road after the SBs had passed, and was looking straight at Bilbo when he suddenly reappeared. I caught a glint of gold as he put something back in his trouser pocket. After that, I kept my eyes open. In fact, I confess that I spied, but you must admit that it was very intriguing, and I was only in my teens. I must be the only one in the Shire, besides you, Frodo, who has ever seen the old fellow's secret book. You've read his book? Cried Frodo. Good heavens above. Is nothing safe? Not too safe, I should say, said Merry, but I've only had one rapid glance, and that was difficult to get. He never left the book about. I wonder what became of it. I should like another look. Have you got it, Frodo? No, it was not at Bag End. He must have taken it away. Well, as I was saying, Merry proceeded, I kept my knowledge to myself till this spring when things got serious. Then we formed our conspiracy, and as we were serious too, and meant business, we have not been too scrupulous. You are not a very easy nut to crack, and Gandalf is worse. But if you want to be introduced to our chief investigator, I can produce him. Where is he? Said Frodo, looking around as if he expected a masked and sinister figure to come out of a cupboard. Step forward, Sam, said Merry, and Sam stood up with a face scarlet up to the ears. Here's our collector of information, and he collected a lot, I can tell you, before he was finally caught, after which, I may say, he seemed to regard himself as on parole, and dried up. Sam, cried Frodo, feeling that amazement could go no further, and quite unable to decide whether he felt angry, amused, relieved, or merely foolish. Yes, sir, said Sam, begging your pardon, sir, but I meant no wrong to you, Mr. Frodo, nor to Mr. Gandalf for that matter. He has some sense, mind you, and when you said go alone, he said no, take someone as you can trust. But it does not seem that I can trust anyone, said Frodo. Sam looked at him unhappily. It all depends on what you want, put in Merry. You can trust us to stick to you through thick and thin, to the bitter end, and you can trust us to keep any secret of yours closer than you keep it yourself. but you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone and go off without a word. We are your friends, Frodo. Anyway, there it is. We know most of what Gandalf has told you. We know a good deal about the ring. We are horribly afraid, but we are coming with you, or following you like hounds. Mwah. I love that passage. If you haven't read the book, that passage is essentially Merry and Pippin and Sam telling Frodo, like, you don't have to explain, we already know, don't worry about it, we're gonna come with you, okay? Like, we don't want you doing this alone, we love you too much to let you go by yourself, so we're gonna be coming along. As we saw earlier on from like Tolkien's early drafts, it could have just been that Frodo is leaving the Shire and he surprises his friends with this news, and he asks them or begs them or orders them to come with him. But, no. Merry gets to have agency. He's smarter than that. He's been paying attention for like at least 18 years. He's been part of a conspiracy. And he makes the narrative so much more interesting and exciting by introducing this little plot twist early on. Like, we get to know him as a clever, observant, caring, and complex character immediately. Like, yeah, he sneaks around and he, like, spies on people and he lies, but it's in the service of being a good friend and trying to help his bestie, Frodo. Like, all of the stuff that he does is because he's curious about the situation Frodo's in, because he wants to help him. Like, it's all in the service of that. He's intentional about his inclusion to the story. Like, Gandalf doesn't initially have to choose him. He opts in. He says, I'm coming. You literally can't stop me. I'll follow you like a hound. Far from being also here as an accessory to the story, Merry is a main player. Like, he's set up as being quick and with it and on board immediately. We become invested in him as like an active participant in the adventure, indeed as a catalyzing factor for his and Pippin's inclusion in the larger quest. They're not leaving Frodo if they can help it, and the friendship that Merry specifically displays by keeping his knowledge a secret, by moving Frodo's stuff across the Shire and unpacking it all into his new house only to leave the next day, is essential to the success of the quest. He's so committed to the bit, it's crazy. And we see throughout the rest of the story that the hobbits remain connected to one another, even when they're separated. They constantly think about each other, and they kind of gain strength from the thought that the others are still going on and moving forward and doing their best. Frodo gets grandfathered or like Uncle Bilbo'd into adventuring, and Sam goes along because it's his job. Merry and Pippin go along because they want to, and they keep going because they love their friends, and they promised they would. Like, Merry is a boy of his word, and the platonic ideal of a friend. So, aside from being probably the best friend in the world ever, another aspect of Merry's perfection, according to Hobbit nature, is how very much he is a star member of the Hobbit PR team. Like, I find this most evident in the Two Towers, so we're going to have a look at a couple of passages. I covered a lot of this in my Let's Read The Road to Isengard and Treebeard videos, so if you're down for more, like, giggling about how funny hobbits can be on the edge of doom, check those out. So in the Two Towers, we get some perfect hobbit behavior from Merry. This is in Chapter 9, Flotsam and Jetsam, after Isengard has been destroyed by the Ents, and Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, Theoden, etc. have all shown up. Gandalf and Theoden go off to chat with Treebeard, and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stay behind to catch up with their fucking boys, who they hunted across Middle-earth for several many days. Aragorn and his companions sat themselves down at one end of a long table, and the hobbits disappeared through one of the inner doors. "Storeroom in there, and above the floods, luckily," said Pippin, as they came back laden with dishes, bowls, cups, knives, and food of various sorts. "And you need not turn your nose up at the provender, Master Gimli," said Merry. "This is not orc stuff, but man food, as Treebeard calls it. Will you have wine or beer? There's a barrel inside there. Very passable. And this is first-rate salted pork. Or I can cut you some rashers of bacon and broil them if you like. I am sorry there's no green stuff. The deliveries have been rather interrupted in the last few days. I cannot offer you anything to follow but butter and honey for your bread. Are you content? Indeed, yes, said Gimli. The score is much reduced. So that's just a little passage, but I love so much how in like the flooded wreckage of this wizard's stronghold, Merry is curating a culinary experience for his friend Gimli. Like, do you want wine or beer? Do you want salted pork, or would you like me to broil you some bacon? Sorry, there's no fresh produce. In our attempts to source locally, we've had some interruptions, and for dessert we can offer you fresh bread with butter and honey. Hobbits really do be making the best of everything at all times. I just find it so cute, and that's absolutely perfect as kind of an example of Hobbit nature on the edge of doom. You really can't dull this boy's shine. Don't even attempt to bushel his candle. You can't. And there's another bit from Merry, this time in chapter 11, the Palantir, when the team, Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Theoden, the Riders of Rohan, they're all riding away from Isengard, and Merry is riding with Gandalf. Are we riding far tonight, Gandalf? Asked Merry after a while. I don't know how you feel with a small ragtag dangling behind you, but the ragtag is tired and will be glad to stop dangling and lie down. So you heard that, said Gandalf. Don't let it rankle. Be thankful no longer words were aimed at you. He had his eyes on you. If it is any comfort to your pride, I should say that, at the moment, you and Pippin are more in his thoughts than all the rest of us. Who you are, how you came there and why, what you know, whether you were captured, and if so, how you escaped when all the orcs perished, it is with those little riddles that the great mind of Saruman is troubled. A sneer from him, Meriadoc, is a compliment if you feel honored by his concern. Thank you, said Merry, but it is a greater honor to dangle at your tail, Gandalf. For one thing, in that position one has a chance of putting a question a second time. Are we riding far tonight? Gandalf laughed. A most unquenchable hobbit. All wizards should have a hobbit or two in their care, to teach them the meaning of the word, and to correct them. I beg your pardon, but I have given thought to even these simple matters. We will ride for a few hours gently until we come to the end of the valley. Tomorrow we must ride faster. I love that passage. Like, Merry giving Gandalf shit and like holding his own as they kind of go toe to toe with each other, like quipping back and forth. And Gandalf's little line about wizards need to have a hobbit or two in their care is a reflection for his fondness for Merry and hobbits on the whole, but especially these little Tookish guys who keep things interesting and keep the story moving forward and shit talk Gandalf pretty much relentlessly. Mwah. So now that we've seen how funny and clever and lighthearted Merry is, even in the darkest of situations, and how he embodies the emotional toughness of hobbits, and how they do tend to find the light side of pretty much anything at all times, we're now going to explore how Merry is a vessel for Tolkien's preoccupation with death. Doesn't that sound fun? But it is valid and it is relevant. A lot of his characters, if not all of the characters in The Lord of the Rings, become extremely concerned with death at one time or another, sometimes outwardly, sometimes it's more subtle. But with Merry, I think it's a good demonstration of his growth and development as a character. And we're just going to look at a few of Tolkien's letters really quick, just to provide context about Tolkien's kind of preoccupation with and thoughts about death during his writing process and afterwards. So in this 1956 letter, Tolkien says he is only concerned with death as part of the nature, physical and spiritual, of man, and with hope without guarantees. So these themes of death and hope are kind of closely intertwined for Tolkien. In another letter from 1956, he notes, "The real theme, for me, is about something much more permanent and difficult, death and immortality. I have told the whole tale more or less through hobbits, and that is because another main point in the story for me is the remark of Elrond in Volume 1. Such is oft the course of deeds that move the wheels of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere. Though equally important is Merry's remark. The soil of the Shire is deep. Still, there are things deeper and higher, and not a gaffer could tend his garden in what he calls peace, but for them." In another letter, this one from 1958, Tolkien notes that it is only in reading the work myself, with criticisms in mind, that I become aware of the dominance of the theme of death. Not that there is any original message in that. Most of human art and thought is similarly preoccupied. But certainly, death is not an enemy. Death, immortality, hope, and how death is not an enemy, these are all kind of strong themes for Tolkien, both while composing and writing the text, and then in reading it back later on, looking into the dark night of his own soul. Tolkien's clearly obsessed with death, and I think it's fitting that he uses Merry as a vessel for his preoccupation and obsession with death. Like, who among us, as human beings, is not obsessed with death? And Tolkien makes clear over and over that The Lord of the Rings is an anthropocentric text, but for hobbits, not for men. But this does not mean that hobbits are not just another version of men, at least in Tolkien's estimation. So they are a convenient kind of vessel or mirror for these themes that Tolkien was grappling with. As I mentioned, this theme of death kind of starts to haunt all of the characters, but Merry sticks out to me as being particularly concerned with death after his separation from Pippin and during his time with the Rohirrim. So in Return of the King, after Pippin looks into the Palantir, Gandalf whisks him away to Minas Tirith, and Merry is alone. He is kind of left in the care of King Theoden, who Merry and Theoden vibed hard at the gates of Isengard when they first met. Theoden was like thrilled to see hobbits smoking, and Merry was like, "Yo, dude, you like to smoke? Let's hang out." Merry rides to Helm's Deep with everyone else after Gandalf and Pippin split off. When they get to Helm's Deep, the king was already there, and as soon as they entered, he called for Merry and had a seat set for him at his side. "It is not as I would have it," said Theoden, "for this is little like my fair house in Edoras, and your friend is gone, who should also be here. But it may be long ere we sit, you and I, at the high table in Meduseld. There will be no time for feasting when I return thither. But come now, eat and drink, and let us speak together while we may, and then you shall ride with me." "May I?" said Merry, surprised and delighted. That would be splendid. He had never felt more grateful for any kindness in words. "I'm afraid I'm only in everybody's way," he stammered, "but I should like to do anything I could, you know." "I doubt it not," said the king. "I have had a good hill pony made ready for you. He will bear you as swift as any horse by the roads that we shall take, for I will ride from the burg by mountain paths, not by the plain, and so come to Edoras by way of Dunharrow, where the Lady Eowyn awaits me. You shall be my esquire if you will. Is there gear of war in this place, Eomer, that my sword thane could use?" "There are no great weapon hoards here, lord," answered Eomer. "Maybe a light helm might be found to fit him, but we have no mail or sword for one of his stature." "I have a sword," said Merry, climbing from his seat, and drawing from its black sheath his small bright blade. Filled suddenly with love for this old man, he knelt on one knee and took his hand and kissed it. "May I lay the sword of Meriadoc of the Shire on your lap, Theoden King?" he cried. "Receive my service, if you will." "Gladly I will take it," said the king, and laying his long old hands on the brown hair of the hobbit, he blessed him. "Rise now, Meriadoc, esquire of Rohan of the household of Meduseld," he said. "Take your sword, and bear it unto good fortune." "As a father you shall be to me," said Merry. "For a little while," said Theoden. "Kill me!" "For a little while? As a father you shall be to me?" Merry's talking about how he doesn't want to be left behind, and how he wants to, be useful. He has a sword. He's all alone now, with a bunch of dudes he barely knows. And Theoden's like, "Yeah, dude, come sit with me. You want to be my esquire? Let's go. Sword Thane? Yeah." The phrase, "for a little while," is so utterly devastating to me. It is so tragic. Firstly, Merry says, "As a father you shall be to me," to a man who just lost his only son. So, Merry saying, "As a father you shall be to me," is devastating. And then Theoden says, "for a little while," as if he knows he's not long for this earth. And like, to talk quickly about latent magic in Middle Earth, I do think the Rohirrim carry with them a kind of death-based, battle-based magic, where Theoden is asking for a sword thane, and Merry is filled with love in his heart for this man he barely knows and just met, and then is like, "Yeah, you're my dad now." To me, that feels a little bit like the kind of rousing magic that the Rohirrim have access to. It's that kind of like soul magic, that like deep, deep spirit magic that like rouses you and rallies you around a cause or a person. I think they've got that. So just keep in mind the phrase "for a little while," because it has absolutely ruined my life. It's the tragedy of time writ large here, right? Like, Theoden so craves for the time and opportunity to forget his troubles for 5 fucking minutes and learn more about hobbits. He's fascinated by them. He thinks they're adorable. The tragedy of time deeply concerns King Theoden. So now that he's got his esquire in the form of Meriadoc Brandybuck, Theoden and them are riding to Dunharrow, and Merry is riding with King Theoden. Merry looked out in wonder upon the strange country of which he had heard many tales upon their long road. It was a skyless world in which his eye, through dim gulfs of shadowy air, saw only ever-mounting slopes, great walls of stone behind great walls, and frowning precipices wreathed with mist. He sat for a moment half dreaming, listening to the noise of water, the whisper of dark trees, the crack of stone, and the vast, waiting silence that brooded behind all sound. He loved mountains, or he had loved the thought of them, marching on the edge of stories brought from far away, but now he was borne down by the insupportable weight of Middle-earth. He longed to shut out the immensity in a quiet room by a fire. He was very tired, for though they had ridden slowly, they had ridden with very little rest. Hour after hour for nearly 3 weary days he had jogged up and down, over passes and through long dales, and across many streams. Sometimes, where the way was broader, he had ridden at the king's side, not noticing that many of the riders smiled to see the two together, the hobbit on his little shaggy grey pony, and the Lord of Rohan on his great white horse. Then he had talked to Theoden, telling him about his home and the doings of the Shire folk, or listening in turn to tales of the Mark and its mighty men of old. But most of the time, especially on this last day, Merry had ridden by himself, just behind the king, saying nothing, and trying to understand the slow, sonorous speech of Rohan that he heard the men behind him using. It was a language in which there seemed to be many words that he knew, though spoken more richly and strongly than in the Shire, yet he could not piece the words together. At times, some rider would lift up his clear voice in stirring song, and Merry felt his heart leap, though he did not know what it was about. All the same, he had been lonely, and never more so than now at the day's end. He wondered where in all this strange world Pippin had got to, and what would become of Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. Then, suddenly, like a cold touch on his heart, he thought of Frodo and Sam. "I am forgetting them," he said to himself reproachfully, "and yet they are more important than all the rest of us, and I came to help them, but now they must be hundreds of miles away, if they are still alive." He shivered. In this passage, there's like a few things here, one of which Merry saying he loved mountains, or he thought he loved them, because it's easy to fall in love with the idea of mountains when you're being told tales of them in your cozy home. It is quite another thing to have climbed those mountains and been defeated by them, to be surrounded by them in a strange land when you're surrounded by strange people. As I discussed in the last video, Sam is one of those hobbits who has that kind of cocksureness and his own traditional wisdom in that he thinks he can summarize everything and boil it down to the stuff that he knows and is familiar with, whereas Frodo and Merry, and also Pippin, have this kind of nobler vision for things beyond themselves, things that they don't understand. Merry says that he used to love mountains, but now that he's actually been confronted with the reality of them and crushed under the insurmountable weight of Middle-earth, he knows better, and he knows that he doesn't actually know shit about fuck. And I think that's important, again, for his ennoblement and his development as a character. I think knowing what you don't know and understanding that you don't and never will understand is important when it comes to building wisdom and building an understanding of the world around you, even if part of your understanding is your ignorance. I think Tolkien lending these layers and these levels to Merry's development, it adds to his complexity. Another thing that I like in this passage is how the writers smile to see the Hobbit riding next to the King of Rohan, and how so many characters in the story throughout, whether the hobbits know it or not, draw inspiration and hope from the appearance of these little guys who run around. They're like, oh, if that little dude is here doing what he can, doing the most, I should probably also do my very best. I think it's really lovely. And then another thing is Merry riding and just listening to the sound of the men riding behind him, talking to one another and singing. And again, that kind of latent heart magic comes into play where Merry doesn't understand what the songs are about, but he knows that he's moved by them. And then finally, when he's thinking of his friends, he thinks of Frodo and Sam, and he adds, if they are still alive. So we can see this kind of theme of death beginning to preoccupy Merry. Without Pippin by his side, without Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Gandalf and Frodo and Sam near him, he becomes a little bit unmoored. Like it seems harder for him to access his font of joy, because he is surrounded by these writers who are, let's face it, very much concerned with death. So Merry is becoming more and more preoccupied with death as the story goes on. When they stop writing, Merry is thinking about where Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli have gone. The paths of the dead, he muttered to himself. The paths of the dead? What does this all mean? They've all left me now. They've all gone to some doom. Gandalf and Pippin to war in the east, and Sam and Frodo to Mordor, and Strider and Legolas and Gimli to the paths of the dead. But my turn will come soon enough, I suppose. I wonder what they're all talking about, and what the king means to do, for I must go where he goes now. In the midst of these gloomy thoughts, he suddenly remembered that he was very hungry, and he got up to go and see if anyone else in this strange camp felt the same. But at that very moment a trumpet sounded, and a man came summoning him, the king's esquire, to wait at the king's board. My boy does have the knack for knowing when it's time to eat. In the inner part of the pavilion was a small space, curtained off with broidered hangings and strewn with skins, and there at a small table sat Theoden with Eomer and Eowyn and Dunhair, lord of Harrowdale. Merry stood beside the king's stool and waited on him, till presently the old man, coming out of deep thought, turned to him and smiled. Come, Master Meriadoc, he said, you shall not stand. You shall sit beside me, as long as I remain in my own lands, and lighten my heart with tales. Again, Theoden is looking to his hobbit friend for some hope and a good mood and some good cheer. But when Merry sits down with Theoden, no tales are actually called for, and Merry goes ahead and asks about the paths of the dead because he can't stop fucking thinking about it. So Theoden kind of explains what the paths of the dead are to Merry, and then sends Merry away to go to bed, and the next morning Merry is awoken and brought back to King Theoden. The king turned to Merry. I am going to war, Master Meriadoc, he said. In a little while I shall take the road. I release you from my service, but not from my friendship. You shall abide here, and if you will, you shall serve the Lady Eowyn, who will govern the folk in my stead. But But Lord, Merry stammered, I offered you my sword. I do not want to be parted from you like this, Theoden King, and all my friends have gone to the battle. I should be ashamed to stay behind. But we ride on horses tall and swift, said Theoden, and great though your heart be, you cannot ride on such beasts. Then tie me onto the back of one, or let me hang on a stirrup, or something, said Merry. It's a long way to run, but run I shall if I cannot ride, even if I wear my feet off and arrive weeks too late. Theoden smiled. Rather than that, I would bear you with me on Snowmane, he said, but at the least you shall ride with me to Edoras and look on Meduseld, for that way I shall go. So far Stibba can bear you. The great race will not begin till we reach the plains. Then Eowyn rose up. Come now, Meriadoc, she said. I will show you the gear that I've prepared for you. They went out together. This request only did Aragorn make to me, said Eowyn as they passed among the tents, that you should be armed for battle. I have granted it as I could, for my heart tells me that you will need such gear ere the end. Now she led Merry to a booth among the lodges of the king's guard, and there an armorer brought out to her a small helm and a round shield and other gear. No mail have we to fit you, said Eowyn, nor any time for the forging of such a hauberk, but here is also a stout jerkin of leather, a belt, and a knife. A sword you have. Merry bowed, and the lady showed him the shield, which was like the shield that had been given to Gimli, and it bore on it the device of the white horse. Take all these things, she said, and bear them to good fortune. Farewell now, Master Meriadoc. Yet maybe we shall meet again, you and I. So already, Theoden is trying to gently let Merry down. And Merry's like, absolutely the fuck not, I'm going. I've been saying, I'll follow you like hounds the whole story, I'm going to continue doing that. So even as Theoden is trying to get Merry to kind of like figure out that he's not going along, and while Merry is surrounded by these riders who seem to be followed by death, if not motivated by death and the promise of an honorable death on the battlefield, even then, even though Merry is kind of crushed under the weight of Middle-earth and understanding that he is not seen as an equal, sword thane though he may be, his spirit is not crushed. Like, he's sad, he's depressed, he's scared, he's unsure of what's going to happen next, but he knows he wants to be there to see what happens. He knows he doesn't want to be left behind. Again, to me, that's part of the relentless spirit of hobbits and Merry's perfection in demonstrating that aspect of hobbit nature. They are hard to kill. They're hard to daunt. They're kind of unflappable in many ways. When Merry and Pippin were captured by the Uruk-hai, Merry was like quipping and making jokes and asking about bed and breakfast when they're being tortured as prisoners of war. Being kind of made to feel left behind by the King of Rohan ain't nothing but a thing for our boy Merry. He's like, one way or another, even if I have to run my feet off my body, I will be there. Even if I show up weeks too late and I miss all the action, I'm still gonna be there. That hope without guarantees, that relentless, unquenchable spirit of hobbits, Merry's got it in spades. And again, that's part of what makes him so perfect in my estimation. He's all the best parts of what a hobbit can be. And I just think he's neat. So when they're riding out, they pass down the long ranks of waiting men with stern and unmoved faces. But when they had come almost to the end of the line, one looked up, glancing keenly at the hobbit. A young man, Merry thought as he returned the glance, less in height and girth than most. He caught the glint of clear gray eyes, and then he shivered, for it came suddenly to him that it was the face of one without hope, who goes in search of death. So, no spoilers, but we know who this young soldier is. But to Merry, it's one without hope who goes in search of death, like looking for death. Nothing else to live for type of vibes. And it does also speak to Tolkien's theme of hope without guarantees. But again, very shortly after, Merry looks into the face of this soldier who's seeking death. Theoden reminds him, "This is no journey for such steeds as Stibba, as I have told you," said Theoden, "and in such a battle as we think to make on the fields of Gondor, what would you do, Master Meriadoc, sword thane though you be, and greater of heart than of stature?" "As for that, who can tell?" answered Merry. "But why, Lord, did you receive me as sword thane, if not to stay by your side? And I would not have it said of me in song, only that I was always left behind." "I received you for your safekeeping," answered Theoden, "and also to do as I might bid. None of my riders can bear you as a burden. If the battle were before my gates, maybe your deeds would be remembered by the minstrels, but it is 100 leagues and 2 to Mundburg, where Denethor is lord. I will say no more." Merry bowed and went away unhappily, and stared at the lines of horsemen. Already the companies were preparing to start. Men were tightening girths, looking to saddles, caressing their horses. Some gazed uneasily at the lowering sky. Unnoticed, a rider came up and spoke softly in the hobbit's ear. "Where will wants not, a way opens, so we say," he whispered, "and so I have found myself." Merry looked up and saw that it was the young rider whom he had noticed in the morning. "You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes. I see it in your face." "I do," said Merry. "Then you shall go with me," said the rider. "I will bear you before me, under my cloak until we are far afield, and this darkness is yet darker. Such good will should not be denied. Say no more to any man, but come." "Thank you indeed," said Merry. "Thank you, sir, though I do not know your name." "Do you not?" said the rider softly. "Then call me Dernhelm." When Theoden asks Merry, "What would you do on the fields of battle?" Merry's like, "I don't know." But Theoden also could not possibly know that it's Merry's small hands that are going to accomplish great deeds. Dernhelm and Merry ride to battle. They're talking about, like, "Come not between the Nazgul and his prey. He will not slay thee in thy turn. He'll bear thee away to the house of lamentation, beyond the darkness, where thy flesh will be devoured, and thy shriveled might be left naked in the lidless eye." And then, Dernhelm is like, "Do what you will, I'll hinder it if I may." The Witch King's like, "No living man may hinder me." And then Dernhelm takes off his helmet, and he is, hey presto, Eowyn. Merry is, like, standing nearby, fucking terrified, because it's the Witch King. And it's when Merry is looking upon Eowyn with her hair released from her helm. Into Merry's mind flashed the memory of the face that he saw at the riding from Dunharrow, the face of one that goes seeking death, having no hope. Pity filled his heart, and great wonder, and suddenly the slow kindled courage of his race awoke. He clenched his hand. She should not die so fair, so desperate. At least she should not die alone, unaided. So it's literally the invocation of death and no hope that stirs Merry to being like, I gotta fucking help her. Like, even if she dies and I die, at least she will have had some help. Like, she shouldn't die alone, and I'm right here. Merry stabs the Witch King in the back of the knee and essentially, like, distracts the Witch King so that Eowyn can finish the job. And speaking of killing the Witch King, remember that letter that I quoted from Tolkien? And he quotes Elrond saying, "Such is oft the course of deeds that move the wheels of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere." I find it poignant and interesting that Merry single-handedly kind of demonstrates this by literally stabbing the Witch King in the back of the knee while the Witch King is distracted by Eowyn. Those are his small hands moving the wheels of the world while the eyes of the great are elsewhere. And it is not lost on me, particularly in this context, that Merry is the vessel for this powerful theme and message at this point of the story, like at this critical point. Of course Merry's there. Of course it's his small hands doing the deeds that move the wheels of the world. So another thing about Dernhelm and Merry together that I think is interesting is that Dernhelm has the face of one who goes seeking death, and it's the one who goes seeking death that conveys Merry to battle, because at this point, Merry's kind of also seeking death, like it's been following him around and haunting him. The paths of the dead he's morbidly curious about, whenever he thinks about Frodo and Sam, he has to caveat with if they're still alive. Like, the reality of the situation, the crushing weight of Middle-earth is coming down upon him now, and I think he finally understands the gravity of the situation that he's gotten himself into, and yet he doesn't turn back, he doesn't balk. He's like, how do I keep moving forward? And it's on the horse of one who goes seeking death. So this theme of death following Merry around and him being obsessed with it at this point continues into the Houses of Healing chapter of Return of the King, where Merry is just kind of wandering around the city of Minas Tirith. So Theoden and Éowyn came to the city of Gondor, and all who saw them bared their heads and bowed, and they passed through the ash and fume of the burned circle, and went on and up along the streets of stone. To Merry, the ascent seemed age-long, a meaningless journey in a hateful dream, going on and on to some dim ending that memory cannot seize. My dude, he's having a bad time. Slowly, the lights of the torches in front of him flickered and went out, and he was walking in a darkness, and he thought, this is a tunnel leading to a tomb. There we shall stay forever. But suddenly, into his dream, there fell a living voice. Well, Merry, thank goodness I have found you. He looked up, and the mist before his eyes cleared a little. There was Pippin. They were face to face in a narrow lane, and but for themselves it was empty. He rubbed his eyes. Where is the king? He said, and Éowyn. Then he stumbled and sat down on a doorstep and began to weep again. They have gone up into the citadel, said Pippin. I think you must have fallen asleep on your feet and taken the wrong turning. When we found that you were not with them, Gandalf sent me to look for you. Poor old Merry. How glad I am to see you again. But you are worn out, and I won't bother you with any talk. But, tell me, are you hurt or wounded? No, said Merry. Well, no, I don't think so, but I can't use my right arm, Pippin, not since I stabbed him, and my sword burned all away like a piece of wood. Pippin's face was anxious. Well, you'd better come with me as quick as you can, he said. I wish I could carry you. You aren't fit to walk any further. They shouldn't have let you walk at all. But you must forgive them. So many dreadful things have happened in the city, Merry, that one poor hobbit coming in from the battle is easily overlooked. It's not always a misfortune being overlooked, said Merry. I was overlooked just now by... No, I can't speak of it. Help me, Pippin. It's all going dark again, and my arm is so cold. Lean on me, merry lad, said Pippin. Come now, foot by foot. It's not far. Are you going to bury me? Said Merry. No, indeed, said Pippin, trying to sound cheerful, though his heart was wrung with fear and pity. No, we are going to the Houses of Healing. Oh, fucking devastation station, dude. Merry is like essentially shell-shocked, wandering around, and as he's following Theoden and Éowyn, who are being born on some like litters, he thinks this is a tunnel leading to a tomb. There we shall stay forever. Like, he's not expecting to live. He knows Theoden's dead. He's not expecting Éowyn to be alive. He's expecting to also die. Like, he would rather be dead than continue on, which is horrible. And then even when Pippin finds him, even when he sees his bud, he's like, are you going to bury me? Like, can we be done now? Can I go to bed forever? And this is a result of the wound he's taken because he stabbed the Witch King. Like, his arm is fucked and he's kind of got the black breath. Like, he's got that shadow of malaise as a result. But like, are you gonna bury me? Like, no, dude. We've got a small hospital. That's where we're gonna go. Like, so we can clearly see that the tone of how Merry talks and like what he's preoccupied by and what he thinks about has shifted completely as a result of his inclusion in the quest and his choices to continue moving forward to align himself with the people that he does, as we'll see very soon, because shit's gonna get better shortly, I promise. It does not change him beyond giving him wisdom. It does not mar his character. It improves it. I think it's important that he's able to face all of this head on and continue moving forward and indeed live through it and arguably become a better Hobbit for it. This all relates to his perfection according to Hobbit nature, his ennoblement throughout the course of the journey, and Tolkien's fondness for him. So, in the Houses of Healing, Aragorn has been kind of paged, and he's secretly in the Houses of Healing helping out because, as we know, the hands of a king are the hands of a healer. Thank you, Yorith. So, eventually, after Aragorn has seen to Éowyn and Faramir, they come to Merry's room. Gandalf and Pippin come to Merry's room, and there they found Aragorn standing by the bed. "Poor old Merry," cried Pippin, and he ran to the bedside, for it seemed to him that his friend looked worse, and a greyness was in his face, as if a weight of years of sorrow lay on him, and suddenly a fear seized Pippin that Merry would die. "Do not be afraid," said Aragorn. "I came in time, and I have called him back. He is weary now, and grieved, and he has taken a hurt like the Lady Éowyn, daring to smite that deadly thing. But these evils can be amended, so strong and gay a spirit is in him. His grief he will not forget, but it will not darken his heart. It will teach him wisdom." Then Aragorn laid his hand on Merry's head, and passing his hand gently through the brown curls, he touched the eyelids and called him by name. And when the fragrance of Ethelas stole through the room, like the scent of orchards, and of heather in the sunshine full of bees, suddenly Merry awoke, and he said, "I am hungry. What is the time?" "Past supper time now," said Pippin, "though I dare say I could bring you something if they'll let me." "They will indeed," said Gandalf, "and anything else that this rider of Rohan may desire, if it can be found in Minas Tirith, where his name is in honor." "Good," said Merry. "Then I would like supper first, and after that a pipe." At that his face clouded. "No, not a pipe. I don't think I'll smoke again." "Why not?" said Pippin. "Well," answered Merry slowly, "he is dead, and has brought it all back to me. He said he was sorry that he never had a chance of talking herb lore with me. Almost the last thing he ever said. I shan't ever be able to smoke again without thinking of him. And that day, Pippin, when he rode up to Isengard and was so polite." "Smoke, then, and think of him," said Aragorn, "for he was a gentle heart and a great king, and kept his oaths. And he rose out of the shadows to a last fair morning. Though your service to him was brief, it should be a memory glad and honorable to the end of your days." Merry smiled. "Well then," he said, "if Strider will provide what is needed, I will smoke and think. I had some of Saruman's best in my pack, but what became of it in the battle, I'm sure I don't know." "Master Meriadoc," said Aragorn, "if you think that I have passed through the mountains and the realm of Gondor with fire and sword to bring herbs to a careless soldier who throws away his gear, you are mistaken. If your pack has not been found, then you must send for the herb master of this house, and he will tell you that he did not know the herb you desire had any virtues, but that it's called Westman's weed by the vulgar, and Galenus by the noble, and other names in other tongues more learned, and after adding a few half-forgotten rhymes that he does not understand, he will regretfully inform you that there is none in the house, and he will leave you to reflect on the history of tongues. And now, so must I. For I have not slept in a bed such as this since I rode from Dunharrow, nor eaten since the dark before dawn." Merry seized his hand and kissed it. "I am frightfully sorry," he said. "Go at once. Ever since that night at Bree we've been a nuisance to you, but it is the way of my people to use light words at such times and say less than they mean. We fear to say too much. It robs us of the right words when a jest is out of place." "I know that well, or I would not deal with you in the same way," said Aragorn. "May the Shire live forever unwithered." And kissing Merry he went out, and Gandalf went with him. Pippin remained behind. "Was there ever anyone like him?" he said. "Except Gandalf, of course. I think they must be related. My dear ass, your pack is lying by your bed, and you had it on your back when I met you. He saw it all the time, of course. And anyway, I have some stuff of my own. Come on now, Longbottom Leaf it is. Fill up while I run and see about some food. And then let's be easy for a bit. Dear me, we Tooks and Brandybucks, we can't live long on the heights." "No," said Merry, "I can't. Not yet at any rate. But at least, Pippin, we can now see them and honor them. It is best to love first what you are fitted to love, I suppose. You must start somewhere and have some roots, and the soil of the Shire is deep, Still, there are things deeper and higher, and not a gaffer could tend his garden in what he calls peace but for them, whether he knows about them or not. I am glad that I know about them, a little. But I don't know why I'm talking like this. Where's that leaf? And get my pipe out of my pack if it isn't broken. So, a lot there. The first thing to note is that, Aragorn's healing wholly brings Merry back to himself. Aragorn literally says, I've called him back.
Well, I'll call you back. Yeah, call me back.
So the kind of malaise that was laying over Merry after he stabbed the Witch King is now lifted.
Boy, that suit. Kick-ass gel.
He's feeling much more himself. The first thing he says is, I'm hungry, which is like, mwah, perfect Hobbit behavior. And then his chat about how he won't smoke anymore because of Theoden, but Aragorn reframes it for him and says, then you definitely should, smoke him if you got him. Smoke weed every day, dude. Think of him when you smoke. You can honor him in this way. And Merry's like, fuck yeah, dude. And then the bit about Merry asking Aragorn where his backpack is, and Aragorn being like, I don't fucking know, dude. That's not my job. Do you think I haven't been a little bit busy with some other stuff? And Merry's like, dog, of course. I'm so sorry. And Aragorn's like, nah, I'm joking. See you later. It's the best. They're so cute. I love their friendship. Everybody's friends. Ugh. And then Pippin being like, okay, fucking pack a bowl. I'm gonna go find some food. And then can we fucking relax for 5 minutes, please? We Tukes and Brandybucks, we can't live long on the heights. And Merry's like, no, we sure can't, but at least we get to see them and acquaint ourselves with them and honor them in the way that we can. It's best to love first what you're fitted to love. So he's talking about, he loves the Shire. That's what he's fitted to love. That's where he's from. But there are things deeper and higher, like the love he has for Rohan and the Rohirrim and King Theoden and Lady Eowyn and Lord Eomer. He is glad to know about them a little, and that's his wisdom showing. He doesn't know everything about them, but he knows a little bit. And he's glad for this knowledge. He's glad that he's come along. He's glad that he's made the choices that he has. And so are we, because if he hadn't been there, things would have turned out a lot differently, I think. So, love this passage. I do think it's a nice kind of full circle on Merry's character development, and that circle comes a little bit thicker when we get towards the end of the book itself. Right, so after the War of the Ring is over, after it's been destroyed, and everyone's reunited, Frodo and Sam are okay, Pippin comes back from the Battle of the Black Gate, and everyone's back together again. Pretty much a happy ending scenario. They're on the way home, and they pass through Rohan and lay Theoden to rest among his forefathers. And Merry stands at the foot of the green mound, and he weeps. And when the song was ended, he arose and cried, Theoden King, farewell. As a father you were to me, for a little while. Farewell. The thing about for a little while that really gets me is the emphasis that time is limited, and it speaks to the way that the Rohirrim are concerned with death. I don't think any of them think that they're going to make it out of this battle alive, and they accept that. And Theoden knows that. That's why he's telling Merry, on the edge of battle, yeah, dude, I'll be your dad for a little while. And the invocation of that line, for a little while, sweeps Merry up in that whole mode of what the Rohirrim are, including a deep preoccupation with and being concerned with death. It is when Merry lays King Theoden to rest that he brings it back around in his own way. As a father you were to me for a little while, expressing gratitude, understanding finally what Theoden meant when he said for a little while. He meant it literally. I'm not going to be around very long. We're not going to get the time that I want to relax together, to speak with one another, to learn more about one another. I think part of Merry's curiosity about Rohan and his need to learn as much as he can about the language is in service of his love for King Theoden and his desire to extend that time, to have Theoden's memory live on. This is why I find the phrase "for a little while" so heartbreaking, because it's self-aware and self-evident, and Merry seems initially not to understand until he very much does. Theoden lives on in Merry's memory forever, but they only got to be connected as friends, and they never really got to do the thing they wanted to do, which was hang out and vibe and smoke together and talk about smoking. And that's just tragic. Like, if there was anyone to enjoy the simple pleasure of a packed pipe with, it's Meriadoc Brandybuck. He's the fucking guy. And Theoden never got to do that. So I think Merry feels that loss very poignantly, both in the moment and for the rest of his life. But it's satisfying to me that he gets to say goodbye to Theoden in this devastating way. And then, before they're about to leave, at last before the guests set out, Eomer and Eowyn came to Merry, and they said, "Farewell now, Meriadoc of the Shire and Holdwine of the Mark. Ride to good fortune, and ride back soon to our welcome." And Eomer said, "Kings of old would have laden you with gifts that Owain could not bear for your deeds upon the fields of Mundburg, and yet you will take naught, you say, but the arms that were given to you. This I suffer, for indeed I have no gift that is worthy, but my sister begs you to receive this small thing, as a memorial of Durnhelm and of the horns of the Mark at the coming of the morning." Then Eowyn gave to Merry an ancient horn, small, but cunningly wrought, all of fair silver with a baldric of green, and Wrights had engraven upon it swift horsemen riding in a line that wound about it from the tip to the mouth, and there were set runes of great virtue. "This is an heirloom of our house," said Eowyn. "It was made by the dwarves, and came from the hoard of Scatha the worm. Errol the Young brought it from the north. He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies, and joy in the hearts of his friends, and they shall hear him and come to him." Then Merry took the horn, for it could not be refused, and he kissed Eowyn's hand, and they embraced him, and so they parted for that time. Beautiful. First of all, Merry has a cool nickname, Holdwine of the Mark. Wow. Secondly, he's not going to take any gifts. No thank you, not for me. But they do give him an heirloom horn of their house. "He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies and joy in the hearts of his friends," which again, to me, speaks to that latent magic that the people of Rohan seem to kind of possess, where the blowing of this horn kind of lets people know what time it is in that way. I just think it's lovely, and it's also a demonstration of the high honor that Merry has earned throughout the course of the journey, throughout his deeds, his steadfastness, his absolute refusal to be left behind, his inclusion in the story overall, and his intention therein brings great honor upon him, and he earns it. Like, this is not unearned honor. Like, they're like, we should be giving you like wagons full of stuff, but you won't take it, like, in order to quantify our gratitude to you. But in absence of that, please take this sick-ass horn at the very least, and Merry agrees to do so. So, when they finally get back to the Shire, again, if you're a movies-only enjoyer, you probably don't know about the Scouring, or you may have heard of it, but you don't know exactly what it is. So, when they get back to the Shire, it turns out shit's bad. They've burned down a lot of trees, they've cut down a lot of other trees, they have built a bunch of shitty industrial type of buildings and dwellings, they've dug up Bagshot Row where Bag End is. It's fucked. There's like black smoke choking the air. All the hobbits are terrified. There's a bunch of like ruffians and men wandering around, and there's a bunch of lists of rules. So when the travelers, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin return, they're like, actually, fuck this. What the fuck is going on? Like, how did this happen? And I love the Scouring of the Shire because it demonstrates that even the idyllic Shire is not immune to the kind of evil that's infecting the rest of the world. It comes to the Shire after the fact in kind of like a reduced form, but it's still there, and it really fucks up their homeland. Like, they don't just get to come home to, like, you know, cheers beers. They have to do some work and clean it out. And Gandalf even tells them, like, you're not going to have me for this one. This one's on you. Y'all have learned enough. You're more than capable. Go clean it up. So when they get back to the Shire, they're kind of talking about, like, what needs to happen, and how Lotho, one of the Sackville Bagginses, they call him Lotho Pimple, he is apparently, as far as they understand at this point, the kind of kingpin. So they're talking about fighting. They're like, someone's gonna have to fight here. And Frodo's like, fight? Well, I suppose it may come to that. But remember, there is to be no slaying of hobbits, not even if they've gone over to the other side. Really gone over, I mean. Not just obeying ruffians' orders because they're frightened. No hobbit has ever killed another on purpose in the Shire, and it is not to begin now. And nobody is to be killed at all if it can be helped. Keep your tempers and hold your hands to the last possible moment. But if there are many of these ruffians, said Merry, it will certainly mean fighting. You won't rescue Lotho or the Shire just by being shocked and sad, my dear Frodo. So Frodo here is doing his pity and mercy thing, which he's so loved and known for. That's why we're all here. That's why everything worked out. Because of Frodo's divine pity and mercy. But Merry's like, can we be realistic for 5 minutes? You're not going to save the Shire just by being shocked and sad. Like, he has a more realistic understanding of what needs to happen now. You have to fight fire with fire, in a way, and kind of use their own shit against them. To continue, Sam says, I have an idea. Let's go to old Tom Cotton's down South Lane. He always was a stout fellow, and he has a lot of lads that were all friends of mine. No, said Merry. It's no good getting under cover. That is just what people have been doing, and just what those ruffians like. They will simply come down on us in force, corner us, and then drive us out, or burn us in. No, we have got to do something at once. Do what? Said Pippin. Raise the Shire, said Merry. Now, wake all our people. They hate all this, you can see. All of them except perhaps 1 or 2 rascals and a few fools that want to be important but don't at all understand what's really going on. But Shire folk have been so comfortable so long they don't know what to do. They just want a match though, and they'll go up in fire. The chief's men must know that. They'll try to stamp on us and put us out quick. We've only got a very short time. Sam, you can make a dash for Cotton's farm if you like. He's the chief person round here, and the sturdiest. Come on, I'm going to blow the horn of Rohan and give them all some music they've never heard before. They rode back to the middle of the village. There Sam turned aside and galloped off down the lane that led south to Cotton's. He had not gone far when he heard a sudden clear horn call go up ringing into the sky. Far over hill and field it echoed, and so compelling was that call that Sam himself almost turned and dashed back. His pony reared and neighed. On, lad, on, he cried. We'll be going back soon. Then he heard Merry change the note, and up went the horn cry of Buckland, shaking the air. I love it. Woo! So when Merry blows his horn from Rohan, the one that Eowyn and Éomer gave him, the one that I believe is, like, you know, latently infused with a little bit of that kind of subtle magic of Middle-earth. When Merry blows the horn, Sam is like, oh shit, I gotta go back. Like, it's so powerful that Sam, who's literally on a mission at this point, is like, oh wait, I gotta go. And his pony's like, can we go back? I love it. I think it's so good and so effective. And Merry's the one who's like, we gotta fight back now. Like, everyone hates this, but they don't know how to start fighting back. They don't know how to start the rebellion, but we're gonna do it. We came back. We have the tools. We've got the facts. We're voting yes. Like, he's ready to go. And he says, we're raising the Shire. Let's go. He, like, lays plans and he gets it done. Oh, I love him. And I think this whole chapter is quite relevant at this time in a kind of larger geopolitical context in our real world. But hey, you didn't hear it from me. maybe go read the Scouring of the Shire. Merry strategizes, he lays some plans, and he literally tells Frodo, I've got a plan. And Frodo's like, good, you make the arrangements, you do it. So Merry's like, I'm walking in front now, I'm the leader. And Frodo's like, please be the leader. I've had more than enough of being the main hobbit in this particular story, thank you very much. They kind of repeatedly corner and like trap the ruffians and kind of get them to surrender. Merry's an excellent tactician. It works over and over. Like, the ruffians are not that bright, but Merry also knows the land. He knows the people. Like, in that passage I just read, he's like, Cotton's the main dude around here. Go talk to him. Go get his lads. Like, whatever you can do, do it. So again, he's like perfect for this job. Just like he's been perfect about everything else in the whole book. So eventually, the Scouring kind of results in a battle. Several hobbits fell, and the rest were wavering when Merry and Pippin, who were on the east side, came across and charged the ruffians. Merry himself slew the leader, a great squint-eyed brute like a huge orc. Then he drew his forces off, encircling the last remnant of the men in a wide ring of archers. And then it's over. So ended the Battle of Bywater, 1419, the last battle fought in the Shire, and the only battle since the Greenfields, 1147, away up in the North Farthing. In consequence, though it happily cost very few lives, it has a chapter to itself in the Red Book, and the names of all those who took part were made into a roll and learned by heart by Shire historians. The very considerable rise in the fame and fortune of the Cottons dates from this time, but at the top of the roll, in all accounts, stand the names of Captains Meriadoc and Peregrine, because they fucking did the work, and Merry in particular was in charge. After the Battle of Bywater, and when the Shire is kind of getting back to itself, thanks to Sam's crazy Johnny Appleseed replanting efforts, we hear that Merry and Pippin lived together for some time at Crickhollow, and there was much coming and going between Buckland and Bag End. The two young travelers cut a great dash in the Shire with their songs and their tales and their finery, and their wonderful parties. Lordly, folk called them, meaning nothing but good, for it warmed all hearts to see them go riding by with their mail shirts so bright, and their shields so splendid, laughing and singing songs afar away. And if they were now large and magnificent, they were unchanged otherwise, unless they were indeed more fair-spoken and more jovial and full of merriment than ever before. So, like, the journey taught them wisdom, teaches them strength and fortitude and patience and loyalty, which were qualities they already had, but they're just enhanced now. They were unchanged otherwise, unless they were indeed more fair-spoken and more jovial and more full of merriment than ever before. So Merry and Pippin come out of it enhanced, you know? You could say ennobled in that way. I don't know. Merry is clearly like a uniting and motivating force throughout the Scouring of the Shire and afterwards. Like, people get stoked when they see him because he's a cool dude, and he's only cooler now that he's back home. So that's essentially his role and development in the main story, from the best fucking friend you've ever had to the best fucking friend you've ever had who kills the Witch King. Along the way, he's separated from Frodo and Sam. And again, remember, Frodo is his best friend, so that sucks. He still gets to hang out with Pippin, but when he's separated from Pippin, he is then kind of thrown into the unknown. He attaches himself to King Theoden because Theoden is kind of like a friendly face and a friendly presence where Merry knows no one. And for a little while, he and Theoden become friends and spend that time together before the tragedy on the fields of the Pelennor, where Merry, again, shows his great worth by stabbing the Witch King. He and Éowyn are in the right place at the right time, and it's as a direct result of their absolute refusal to turn away and their ongoing hope without any kind of grounds to have any hope. So I think Merry's character development is significant. Like, he continues to opt in throughout the course of the journey. He's given many opportunities to turn back, but he never does. And I just think that's important. His friendship and his love for not only Frodo, but the entire fellowship, and then everyone he meets along the way as a consequence, it just shines through and it guides him forward and it keeps him moving. So, now that we've had a closer look at Merry as a character in the story, we're gonna kind of take a look at the meta text of Lord of the Rings, which there are several levels here, right? In that the Lord of the Rings that we get to read is ostensibly the compiled and translated red book that Tolkien found and like crafted this history out of that we get to read. So in canon, the red book is a real book. It's Bilbo's book, There and Back Again, that he gives to Frodo, and Frodo writes The Lord of the Rings, which is what we just read. It's not just Frodo who writes it. Sam gets a bit. Merry and Pippin obviously contribute a lot because they are point of view narrating characters in many of the chapters. So they're clearly like part of the compositional process and like part of the archiving of the War of the Ring. And we learn in the Appendices and in the prologue of the Fellowship that Merry did a lot of work on this. It cracks me up, honestly, that the first Hobbit we actually hear from in The Lord of the Rings, if you read the prologue, is Merry. In the second part of the prologue, the concerning pipeweed bit, we talk about, pipeweed, as you might expect. All that could be discovered about it in antiquity was put together by Meriadoc Brandybuck, later master of Buckland, and since he and the tobacco of the South Farthing play a part in the history that follows, his remarks in the introduction to his Herblore of the Shire may be quoted. And then it goes on to quote Merry from the Herblore of the Shire, which I think is really lovely. As part of this quote that we get from Merry, he says, "Observations that I have made on my own many journeys south have convinced me that the weed itself is not native to our parts of the world, but came northward from the lower Anduin, whither it was, I suspect, originally brought over sea by men of westerness. It grows abundantly in Gondor, and there is richer and larger than in the north, where it is never found wild and flourishes only in warm, sheltered places like Longbottom. The men of Gondor call it sweet Galenas, and esteem it only for the fragrance of its flowers. From that land it must have been carried up the Greenway during the long centuries between the coming of Elendil and our own days. But even the Dunedain of Gondor allow us this credit. Hobbits first put it into pipes. Not even the wizards first thought of that before we did. Though one wizard that I knew took up the art long ago, and became as skillful in it as in all other things that he put his mind to." And I love this, firstly because it kind of connects back to my Merry has been here the whole time chat, where literally the first Hobbit's voice we actually get to read or hear from is Merry's in the Herblore of the Shire part. And I really enjoy that quote in particular because it shows the work and the research he's done in his time after the War of the Ring. So he's traveled about, he's learned a lot about pipeweed and herblore, and he says, even the Dunedain of Gondor allow us this credit, and he's not being hyperbolic. Literally, Aragorn, the Dunedain, is like, yeah, y'all probably thought to smoke it up first. And then when he talks about one wizard that I knew, again, he's not exaggerating or like fibbing or enhancing for literary dramatic effect. He's being serious. And he knows this wizard well enough to know his hobbies. Like, I just love it. So if you read the prologue, like if it's your first time reading The Lord of the Rings and you're reading the prologue, the first Hobbit you hear from is Merry. And you learn that he's a guy of some importance because he's noted as being later the Master of Buckland, whatever that is. And then we know that he knows the Dunedain of Gondor and at least one wizard. So I just find that delightful, and it lends to the knowledge that Merry is essentially an historian and an archivist and a writer. So later on in the prologue, we get the note on the Shire records, and I'm going to read this little passage from the note on the Shire records. Since Meriadoc and Peregrine became the heads of their great families, and at the same time kept up their connections with Rohan and Gondor, the libraries of Bucklebury and Tuckborough contained much that did not appear in the Red Book. In Brandy Hall there were many works dealing with Eriador and the history of Rohan. Some of these were composed or begun by Meriadoc himself, though in the Shire he was chiefly remembered for his Herblore of the Shire, and for his Reckoning of Years, in which he discussed the relation of the calendars of the Shire and Bree to those of Rivendell, Gondor, and Rohan. He also wrote a short treatise on old words and names in the Shire, showing special interest in discovering the kinship with the language of the Rohirrim of such Shire words as Matham and old elements in place names. At Great Smiles, the books were of less interest to Shire folk, though more important for larger history. None of them was written by Peregrine, but he and his successors collected many manuscripts written by scribes of Gondor, mainly copies or summaries of histories or legends relating to Elendil and his heirs. Only here in the Shire were to be found extensive materials for the history of Numenor and the arising of Sauron. It was probably at Great Smiles that the Tale of Years was put together with the assistance of material collected by Meriadoc. Though the dates given are often conjectural, especially for the Second Age, they deserve attention. It is probable that Meriadoc obtained assistance and information from Rivendell, which he visited more than once. So, as a scholarly text, it turns out we lean a lot on the information that Merry gathered and brought back to the Shire, and also that Pippin gathered and brought back to the Shire. But Merry wrote a bunch of stuff. Like, he did a bunch of research about language and calendars and weed, and he wrote it all down, and it contributes mightily to the story we then get to read as The Lord of the Rings. A lot of the material, like in the appendices and in the story itself, we get to have and read and enjoy because Merry did a lot of work in canon. To kind of get back to the Red Book as like the in-canon text of The Lord of the Rings, I'm going to blur the line between text and metatext for just a moment and say that the tone of the story gets more serious as it goes on. And this is a reflection of the journey of the hobbits who experienced it and later wrote about it, right? Like, they are the point of view narrating characters for the majority of the relevant action, and their development and ennoblement are kind of woven into the text. It informs how they talk and write. Like, it develops and changes as they do. And again, to take another step out from the text and towards the metatext, we're going to talk briefly about Tolkien's understanding of hobbits as he wrote The Lord of the Rings. As I mentioned in the previous video, Tolkien did not much approve of hobbits. He thought they were kind of silly, and he didn't think he had anything more to say about them when he was asked to write a sequel to The Hobbit, and he wanted to spend time on his more grandiose Silmarillion work, but the hobbits eventually kind of wiggle their way into that same world of Middle-earth. They kind of prove themselves more than worthy of inclusion in the highest fantasy, and in fact, they become part of the reason that we get to enjoy it, with Merry playing a key role in the gathering and preservation of the important information to highlight the role of hobbits in the larger story. For someone who didn't much approve of hobbits, Tolkien sure put a lot of himself into Merry and into all of his other hobbit characters. I really do think that Tolkien identified with all of his hobbits in different ways, but the fact that Merry was fully formed and there from the start, again, is important, I think. I'm not saying that Tolkien intentionally wrote a self-insert character, but if he happened to infuse any particular character with his own traits and inclinations, my thinking is that it's the guy who likes to smoke, who's into linguistics, who does a lot of historical research, who gathers and compiles historical texts, and puts together, you know, a reckoning of calendars and an understanding of languages. Tolkien's very familiar with this, and familiar with Merry immediately. It also makes me laugh that Merry wrote all of these texts, but he's best known in his hometown for his work on herblore and his work on calendars, where his works on, you know, the languages of Rohan and the Shire, not as important to anyone else, but that's what's important to him. That's what moves his heart. That's what he listens to when he's writing with the Rohirrim. And, you know, Tolkien was better known for his Hobbit stuff, but his real passion was for the languages and histories of Middle-earth. Intriguing parallels, is all I'll say. In the story, Merry's small hands accomplish great things, and also in the metatext, Merry's curiosity and tookishness and his need to know more about the world around him, those are the things that lend so much to the text that we get to read. So much of the work Mary did is stuff that Tolkien would have been reading while he was compiling and translating The Lord of the Rings. So, again, I think he perfectly bridges that gap between the author and the text that we read and the story Tolkien contrived to get that text into our hands. Mary is just such a significant part of that. It seems crazy to me that anyone would think he's not. He's such an essential aspect of the entire conceit of the thing. Again, both in the composition of the text and within the story that the text tells. So to go back to Tolkien's own words on the subject of hobbits and ennoblement, nothing moves Tolkien so much as ennoblement, and his hobbit characters are clearly ideal subjects for it. Merry starts out pretty perfect according to Hobbit standards, and he somehow becomes even more perfect over the course of the quest, more patient and understanding, more mature, more wise, more full of joy and merriment than ever before. It just tickles me that there's so much room in Tolkien's heart and mind for Hobbit ennoblement, and that it takes on so many different forms in this story. As Dante notes, nobility takes many forms. So Merry, throughout the story, has shown himself to perfectly embody Hobbit traits while playing a large part in an adventure that culminates with the perfect set of circumstances to complete the quest of the ring. And those are circumstances that Merry directly contributed to, with his unwavering loyalty to his friends, his steadfast resolution to contribute in some way, and his actions on the fields of the Pelennor and by water. And again, Merry's contributions to those circumstances, that perfect set of circumstances, are further evidence of his ennoblement and his development from an excellent hobbit in the Shire to an honored and known figure across Middle-earth, a figure of myth and legend. Like, in the Appendices, there's just a couple things really quick that I need to touch on. In 1432, Meriadoc, called the Magnificent, he gets a sick nickname, Meriadoc the Magnificent. He becomes Master of Buckland. Pippin later becomes Thane, and then, in 1484, in the spring of the year, a message came from Rohan to Buckland that King Eomer wished to see Master Holdwine once again. Meriadoc was then old, 102, but still hale. He took counsel with his friend the Thane, and soon after they handed over their goods and offices to their sons, and rode away over the Sarn Ford, and they were not seen again in the Shire. It was heard after that Master Meriadoc came to Edoras, and was with King Eomer before he died in that autumn. Then he and Thane Peregrine went to Gondor, and passed what short years were left to them in that realm, until they died and were lain in Rath Dinen, among the great of Gondor. In 1541, on March 1st, came at last the passing of King Elessar. It is said that the beds of Meriadoc and Peregrine were set beside the bed of the great king. Merry and Pippin do not die in the Shire. They die in Gondor, after visiting Rohan one last time, and then they go to see King Elessar, their best bud, and when they die, and when Aragorn eventually also passes, they are laid to rest together. Literally best friends forever. And again, to be buried next to the king is a place of high honor, no matter which way you slice it. So I just think that's important. One final thing on Merry's kind of longevity and his place in history, both outside of the Shire and within it. In the Buckland, the Horn of the Mark was blown at sundown every November 2nd, and bonfires and feastings followed. So, November 2nd is the day that the Horn of Rohan was first blown in the Shire, which is when Merry shows up and raises the Shire. So, in order to pay homage to Merry's role in the Scouring and the saving of the Shire, they blow that horn every year on the anniversary day, November 2nd. And I just think that's wonderful. Like, even after Merry leaves the Shire for good, he is still remembered and immortalized in the traditions of the Shire, and in the book that he helped contribute to that we get to eventually read. Without Merry, The Lord of the Rings doesn't happen, both in terms of the story and in terms of Tolkien writing the story. Merry showed up first. He was the first character who like made Tolkien feel confident and like he had somewhere to go with all of this because Merry's such a solid and sound fucking dude. So once he had Merry kind of locked in, the other hobbits kind of fall into place eventually, and then the story continues on. And Merry stays in it the whole time, even when Tolkien doesn't necessarily know what to do with him or what his role is, he's still there the whole time. I think that's significant. And also, again, at the end of the story, we don't get to read about any of it without the in-canon work that Merry does to pull all of the resources together and contribute to the Red Book and its preservation. Literally, on every level, without Meriadoc Brandybuck, there is no Lord of the Rings. Whew. Bold claim, I know, but I hope you understand a bit better now why I think this character is so important and why it bums me out that the fandom seems to think he's also here. Like, far from being just another hobbit in this story of several many hobbits, the role Merry plays in the story as a character and in the metatext as a touchstone for Tolkien is essential. Like, the story does not turn out the same without him. Like, without his spirit of adventurousness, his steadfastness in sticking to his convictions, his seriousness when the situation calls for it, his humanity, his relatability, and his unyielding love for his friends. As noted earlier, he is changed but not marred by the quest, and he remains a perfect example of hobbit nature according to what Tolkien requires for a good and interesting story about hobbits. Merry's tookishness and curiosity carries through every thread in the story for me, from his literal inclusion in the story at his own behest as a member of the conspiracy, to his ongoing choices to keep himself involved, to the work he does to kind of satiate his curiosity, to learn more about the language of Rohan, to learn more about how the different calendars relate to one another, to learn more about herb lore in order to honor his friend King Theoden. That spark of curiosity that gets the ball rolling is what makes Merry such a perfect character and such a perfect hobbit and so ennobled in that perfection. Within the canon, with an understanding of what the Red Book is and how we came to have it, the information in the text would not be nearly as deep or as rich without the contributions of one Meriadoc Brandybuck. And I have just one other little side note at the end here. Remember how Merry is given the name Holdwine in Rohan, and how originally his original character's first appearance in the text as Marmaduke is as the inheritor or the holder of Frodo's wine? I just think that's nice. And I think it brings his journey as a character full circle in a very satisfying way. Hold my wine, indeed. So, there it is. This Hobbit stuff clearly goes super deep for me, and it just bums me out to see such a significant character reduced to what we get in the movies, and I've been relentlessly compelled to talk about it for like over 20 years now. So I crammed as much in here as I could because Merry is very important to me, and he's important to the story, and he was important to Tolkien. He's a cool dude, and I love him a lot, and I personally think that his character development is some of the best we get in the book. Besides Pippin, of course. And we'll get to him next, in a little while. See you soon for that. Love you. Bye.
Take a picture that you like from your stuff and cut it into pieces. Then you won't know how the heck to put it back together, and it's a homemade puzzle of yours.